Thank you so much for joining me for this fall vegetable gardening webinar. And this is one that I've given in the past, so it's not brand new, but hopefully it'll provide a lot of information for you, some good stuff that you'll be able to use if you're interested in gardening through the fall and winter season and into early spring. One thing that I've started to do is ask everyone if they are so inclined to please drop their location into the chat box. This helps me keep track of where everybody is from since our reach has started to get actually outside of the state, which is kind of exciting to see where everyone is from. And hopefully, this one is pretty much geared towards the southeast. But there's a lot of stuff here that's definitely relevant to wherever you may be from. So even if you're not in the local area from where I am, near the metro Atlanta area, this is certainly relevant if you're even in South Carolina or even in Alabama. So please, if you don't mind, go ahead and put that in there in the chat box. And if you have questions that pop up during the course of the webinar, feel free to drop those in the chat box as well. And I will get those at the end and hopefully answer all of your questions. But I appreciate you tuning in. And this is recorded as I record most of my webinars and is put on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, which there will be a QR code at the end that will tell you where to go and get access to that. So I will go ahead and get started. So let's just dive right in. Some people really enjoy gardening all seasons of the year, and they've got a plan. I've done a couple webinars. I did one on maximizing your production in your vegetable garden, and that basically means here in the Atlanta metro area that's all year round. Some people just really enjoy summer gardening. They love the summer garden vegetables, and to them, that is gardening, and they really just don't get into the winter stuff. They don't want to be outside. To them, maybe it's too cold. They don't like greens because that's what a lot of winter vegetables are. They're greens, and they're just not interested. And that's fine too, because, there's a little bit of something for everyone out there for gardening. So when you're going to choose where or what you're going to garden for specifically, and some of this is applicable to summer gardening too, but we'll just pretend like we're just talking about just straight up winter gardening here. So when you're first starting out, let's say you don't have anything there, you're moving into a new house, you got a new backyard, and you're just starting out, you want 6 to 8 hours of daily sunshine. So the sunshine in the wintertime typically is less intense. So it is important that you're getting more hours of it. Otherwise, your plants may not get all of the sunlight that they need. So whenever you're siting it, kind of keep that in mind, as if you're going to garden in the summer too. So you're going to try to avoid trees and hedges because that's going to give you some extra shady time that maybe you don't want. It's nice if you're out there in the afternoon that you have some shade when you're working in the garden, so it's not quite as hot, but large trees can hover over your garden and really cut back on the amount of sunlight that you get. So it's very important that you're siting if you have raised beds or your in-ground garden, further away from trees and hedges. You also want to think about the convenience to your house. Most people don't like walking up or down hills. They don't want to walk a half an acre out to get to their garden. I mean, maybe if you're in a bigger property and you've got a gator, or you got a golf cart or something like that, it's a little easier to do that. And if you can do that, that's great. If not, most people want it close, and consequently also access to water. So most folks are going to have an outdoor water spigot on the side of their house or near on their apartment building. If you have some space out back, maybe they've thought about that. If you're doing it on a patio, you don't have to worry about some of this stuff. You're just doing containers and you can move those around. You just put casters underneath them, or, perhaps they're just more of a permanent fixture. You're also going to look at your ground topography. So in my case, I have a downhill slope in my backyard. It starts from the street up front and then it just continues on down. And my garden is in the way back of about an acre. So, do I regret that? Maybe a little bit, because that's a lot of walking up and down, especially if you forget something and you have to walk all the way back up to get to whatever it was you forgot, your shovels, your hand trowels, that kind of stuff. But I didn't really have a choice because that's the only place out there that I have sunshine. So everything else is very shady. I have a lot of trees. So you have to kind of take that into account. You're going to balance the topography with the hours of sunlight that you have. If you have the opportunity, you're going to select medium textured soils. What does that mean? Well, when I think of soils, and we'll talk about that a little bit, I'm thinking of something that's going to be kind of silty, loamy, well drained, maybe a little bit of sand in there, some good organic content, that kind of stuff. You can always amend your soils, but if you start out with decent soils, it's always easier to kind of get where you need to go. And then lastly, we're going to avoid high traffic areas. Sometimes we don't have a choice. If we don't have a big house or big yard, maybe you just have a tiny little area out back behind your condo that you can work in and people walk back and forth behind there. You take what you can get. But if you can pick where you're not in a high traffic area, that's probably better. So I alluded to the what kind of soil is best here. So this is a soil pyramid, if without getting too fancy about it. But what it does is it kind of breaks down the three components of soil. So clay, which has very, very tiny particles, but does hold water very, very well. Sand, which has rather large particles and is very porous. And then silt, which silt tends to have a lot of organic content in it, tends to be a little bit richer and has kind of medium particles. So when you take each of those three, my ideal would be about 33% each. But ideally, and you can see there about 33%, the sand clay loam mixture per science is the best kind of soil that you're wanting to look for. And that's because the clay particles, being as small as they are, will hold moisture better. The sand actually adds to the drainage abilities of the soil. So it makes a bigger particle, kind of breaks up that clay a little bit, makes it easier for those plants' roots to grow through it. And that loamy organic matter, that's going to add a little bit of richness to the soil, make it a little fluffier, and definitely make it easier for those roots to grow through. So kind of a third of each. And you can make your own, or you can purchase your own. If you're trying to do in-ground, you may have noticed you have really heavy clay, and that's okay. Clay's okay. It has a lot of good mineral content, which is what plants need, but you need structure, and that's what this is here. So you can always amend to get the structure better for your plants. So soils of Gwinnett County. Now, this may be different depending on where you are in the state of Georgia or outside the state, but here in Gwinnett County, we have kind of we tend probably more on the acidic side. So some parts of the county are going to be low, like 5.5 on a scale. And if you're not familiar with it, I've got it down below. You've got acidic, the acidic part of the pH scale, which is going to be 0 all the way up to 7. 7 is neutral. And then you have the alkaline or basic side of the pH scale, and that's going to be 7 up to 14. So here in Georgia, we almost always tend to be in the 5 to mid 6 range. Sometimes you'll find a little closer to 7, but generally speaking, it's going to be on the acidic range. Whereas if you were maybe in Kentucky or some other parts of the country where we have a limestone geologic base, which we don't have here, that's going to be like the lime that you add to your soil here. And that is going to help buffer the soil. I'm not going to get into the lime buffering capacity or any of that stuff. Um, I've got some other webinars where we dive more into the soil chemistry and all of that. But basically, here it's going to be a little bit more acidic. So is that a problem? Well, it could be a little bit of a problem. There are plants that prefer it to be a little bit more acidic, like blueberries, for instance, or camellias. That's another one. That's another flower. There's all sorts of plants out there that do prefer it a little bit more acidic, but for the I guess for the generalities of it, most of them are going to prefer a pH that's going to be somewhere in the 6 to 6.8 range. That's going to be considered ideal for most plants. And why is that? Well, because pH affects the nutrient availability. So when I say that most plants are going to be, preferring a 6 to 6.8, that's because that's the sweet spot. You can see that line there that kind of transects through the little chart over here, and it says best. Well, that is where plants are happiest. That's where they can absorb the most nutrients. So you have kind of in decreasing amounts of necessity there for plants. So plants need the most nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and then calcium, magnesium. So we move from macronutrients all the way down the scale to micronutrients. And there are others there. There are, 13 to 15 or 16 different micro or nutrients that plants need that need in less and less amounts. But when you have a pH that's in that 6 to 6.8 range, as you can see there, that's where roughly 6.5. You can see based on the graph there that that's where most of those tend to be bioavailable. So that's why it's important when you're looking at soil and what kind of soil you have in your garden, regardless of if it's in a raised bed or if it's an in-ground, why it's important not only for the texture of the soil so the plant's roots can grow through that, but also for the availability of nutrients in there so that plant has the ability to get the nutrients it needs to actually grow and produce whatever it is that that particular plant is going to produce. So, without going, like I said, too deep in a dive, where you see those large uh, bell curve type humps, that's where it's most bioavailable at that particular part of the pH scale. And so most of those are going to be, and it's kind of a happy medium, and that's consequently where most plants are. Right. So some of you are like, well, why is it such a big deal? Why is the pH such a big deal? Well, this is why. So this is a visual. I can show you the chart, which I did, and say, this is what plants like. And you could look at it and be like, well, yeah, so? Well, this shows you pick visually what the plant looks like when it's growing in a particular pH. So you can see here, you've got some type of a, looks like a brassica of some sort, so Swiss chard or something like that that's growing here. But at a 7.1, so 7 is going to be neutral. And remember, plants like it when it's going to be like 6 to 6.8. So they're going to be happiest there. And probably a little bit maybe on the other side. You can get away with a little bit over 7 as well. But as you get further away from there, those nutrients get less and less what we call bioavailable. So remember that bell curve, you know, it's happiest right there. But as it tapers off, it's not nearly as available. And you notice, even as you move up towards 10 here, that plant starts to turn yellow. And it's not for not having those nutrients there, it's just that pH affects that plant's ability to uptake those nutrients. And so even though it's all there, it can't access it. It's like a closed door. So it's really important that you're looking at the pH of wherever you're going to site your garden, or if it's in a raised bed, what you're putting into that bed. You need to make sure that whatever you're putting in there is good quality garden soil, something that has mixed in all of those nutrients, both macronutrients and micronutrients. So it's very important. So here are all the macronutrients and the micronutrients. We're not going to spend a ton of time on that, but This is in order. So the macronutrients, this is what they need the most of. The NPK ratio, they need the most of that. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and then calcium, magnesium, sulfur. And then you get into the micronutrients, they need less and less of that. Chloride, boron, or chlorine, iron, copper, zinc, molybdenum, nickel, and then there are a few other very trace elements that plants need. So if you're looking at organics, and again, I have other webinars that talk about that. I tell people when you're doing organics, look at the chemistry of whatever it is that you're sourcing as an organic source of nutrients for plants. Fish meal, borax, all of that stuff. Look at the chemical compounds because that's what's important. You need to be able to identify what that plant needs. And so sometimes you're going to get yellow leaves or veins or stuff that'll pop up. And by knowing the chemical compound, which is all of this stuff here, you know what you need to do to treat it because you can look at that chemical compound and go, oh, it's got calcium in there and that plant is deficient in calcium. So I'll give it some of that, like eggshells. So again, what do the fertilizers, the numbers on the fertilizer bag mean? Well, so some folks they think of like roots and fruits and all around. So there's little sayings that float around out there. But this one is, just as good as any of the others. So nitrogen, that's going to be all the green stuff. So if you think about when you have your lawn, if you want it to be nice and green and pretty, you're going to put down a lot of nitrogen. So lawn fertilizers typically have a really high first number and then a very low or non-existent second and third number because they just want the nitrogen because that makes the grass green up and look pretty. And so that's great for plants too, but you got to balance it out with other stuff as well. So nitrogen, think about up because that's where it's going. It's going to grow. The plant is going to grow and use that. Phosphorus, that's going to reach down to the roots. It's also going to help produce blooms so down, and all the nutrients are going down. And then potassium, that's kind of all around. So potassium benefits the metabolic parts or the metabolic rate and all of that of the plant, its ability to pump out flowers and to grow new roots and all of that, all the parts. So it's like an all around well-being. It's like a multivitamin for plants, if you will. And so these are kind of it's a breakdown of when plants need more of a particular thing. So for instance, if you planted a seed and you've got the germination phase, so that plant, it's sending out a couple seed leaves and then some true leaves. It needs a lot more iron and some zinc and some manganese at that point. And then next up, after you get the true leaves that come out, it's going to be vegetative phase. You're going to get more plant growth out of that. So you need more iron and zinc and manganese and copper and some boron. And then when you're flowering, which is the next step up, the plant is trying to get its life cycle going. And that's where the flowers, you need more iron and more boron. And then in the phase where it's fruited, it's got the fruit on there, whether it's like, for an instance, a determinate tomato where it's produced all of its fruit at one time, or maybe lima beans or green beans where you need to continue to harvest and you're trying to short circuit that because you don't want the plant to just shut down. Copper, molybdenum, and boron, those are important. So before I would be remiss if I did not suggest that you don't get a soil test. So we of course do soil tests at UGA Extension. They're cheap. We only charge $8, but check out each office if you're not in the Gwinnett County area. Your extension office, regardless of what state you are in, should do a soil test for you. And they're all very reasonably priced. They're going to look at the top, usually the top two nutrients, not nitrogen because it's kind of variable, and then some of the other macro or micronutrients, and also the pH. And that will tell you what you need to do in order to make your plants happier. So this is how you go about a soil test. Very easy. We usually tell people break it down into whatever the area is that you're going to take the test for. So your front yard, your backyard, maybe you have a food plot for deer because you've got more property. Maybe you've got some raised beds and you've got soil that you dug up from the back of your yard and moved it into your raised beds. So break it down into whatever area that you're going to call that sample. Once you've identified it, then you're going to collect 6 to 8 samples, unless it's a really tiny area. Sometimes it's as simple as you've got blueberry bushes, and so maybe you only got 3 bushes. So you're only going to take a handful of samples around each of those bushes. So you're going to go down about 4 inches for a lawn, 6 inches for garden to ornamentals. Take a hand trowel or a shovel, dig down there, get a shovel full of dirt, put it in a clean bucket. Once you've gotten your 6 to 8 samples, mix that up really well because it's a random sample. We don't want just from one particular area, so it's important it's random. And then take about 2 cups of that, throw it in a Ziploc bag, and then you go down to your extension office. We will help you from there. Make sure that it doesn't have a lot of debris in it. We only really want the soil, okay? So if it's got a lot of roots and leaves and other organic matter, pluck that stuff out. If it's rained and it's really, really wet, we can set it aside and dry it for you on a newspaper, but you can do that too. So maybe put it on your garage floor or on the back porch or whatever. Let it dry out. The lab, we transfer it into a paper bag, and the lab gets really cranky when we send stuff that's too wet and the bag disintegrates, and then we don't know who it belongs to. So try to have it fairly dry when you get it to us. And this is what it'll look like. So you'll get a soil sample bag. We just make notes on there, like which test you're testing for. We got so many. There's tons and tons of soil. We also do water testing. We do forage testing. We do plant testing for nutrient value, all sorts of stuff. So it's not just soil testing, but we'll also ask you for crop codes. So we want to know what you're growing. If it's your lawn, we need to know what type of grass it is. If it's your garden, what your like general vegetable garden. If it's your ornamentals, fruit trees, all of that stuff. We have a code for all of that, and we'll help you fill out the bag, put your information on there, and then the lab uses that crop code when they send that soil test back to you, and you'll get something that looks like this. So you'll have a line that goes across. It'll show you anything above that you've got too much of, anything below that line you don't have enough of. And on the pH side, if you are below that line, you're below what you should be, and you need to treat it to get that pH back up into where it needs to be. If you're above that, it's too much, and they may recommend that you amend it somehow, either adding sulfur if it's too basic or alkaline, or add in some lime if you're too acidic. But the lab will put all of those recommendations down at the bottom of the page. And if you see that little kind of bar underneath, that is a fertilizer calculator. So sometimes you do need fertilizer. They will recommend a particular blend, but there's so many blends of fertilizer out there. Why go buy more when you might have some in your garage? So it's easy. You just click that. It'll take you to their website. You can input what you have against what you need, and it'll change the ratios and tell you how many pounds you need in order to treat whatever their recommendations were. And if you're not comfortable doing all of that, it's just simple ratios. But if you're not comfortable, feel free to call your local extension office, and we are happy to walk you through it. So organic amendments. This is probably the best thing that you can do if you've got hard pan clay, or if you have a raised bed that may be in a community garden that you've inherited from somebody who just didn't do a whole lot. So UV radiation will break down organic content over time. Decomposers, the little bugs and the microorganisms, will also break stuff down over time. So sometimes, for instance, if you have a raised bed situation and you've put various types of compost and other things in there, maybe you have topsoil. It's not topsoil. It's just composted pine bark that you got from the big box stores, and it's not fully composted yet. So over time, of course, that cellulose breaks down and the level will drop down. So you can add some of this stuff in. This will kind of fluff up the soil. It gives a little extra nutrient, but it's very good for those roots to grow in. And in the case of the cow manure here, the black cow, it's got actually a little bit of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Not much, but a little bit. So it's good for your garden, regardless of whether you've got a summer garden or a winter garden or containers, raised beds, whatever you have. Go ahead and add that in every year if you would like to. Look for the sales. Sometimes they mark it down, but organic amendments are a great thing to add to your garden. All right, so compaction. That's a problem. So if you have raised beds, it's not as big an issue as if you are working with an in-ground garden. Now, whether that be vegetables in this case that we're talking about or ornamentals, you want to try not to walk on the soil right after a really heavy rain. It's going to compact it right down. So really get out there when that moisture is right. You should be able to kind of pick up some of that soil and kind of crumble it. Not too wet, not too dry. I mean, we don't want the dust bowl where you're out there tilling things and the big wind comes and takes off half your topsoil. So just make sure that you're not out there walking on it too much, and that you're not tilling and causing problems with clumping and other stuff, especially for in-ground gardening if you're rehabbing a bed or for vegetables, unless that soil moisture is right. And here's the hand test that I mentioned, and you can see what I'm talking about. So if it's too wet, you shouldn't be able to squeeze it and wring any moisture out of it. Or sorry, if it's just right. Sometimes you can actually squeeze moisture out of it. If there's a lot of clay content in your soil, it's going to hold a lot of water. Just as an aside, when you have a pond, they use clay as the base of your pond because it holds the water in. As I've mentioned a couple times, the soil particles are very tiny. So they are very compact, they're very close together, and they act as a great seal. So clay's good in moderation, but too much of it, and it actually can act as a seal. I mean, heck, they make clay pots out of it. You drink out of your coffee cup. So you just want to make sure that you're adding in some amendments to make it a little bit more habitable for your plant roots. But too wet, and it's not really good to plant in that. It's hard to work with tools. It's just not fun. So it may make sense to just go ahead and give it a day or two to kind of dry out after a good rain. All right, so planting the garden. This little publication here, vegetable planting chart, they redid this, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And I love this thing. I have printed them off if I go do an in-person program or workshop or something like that, or we do an event. I usually bring some of these because they are so handy. If you're new to gardening or you're new to Georgia, maybe you moved from a different area, maybe up west or out west, up north, and you're not familiar with the growing seasons or what you can grow down here, this is perfect for that. So the QR code right there will take you right to it so you can download it and get your own digital copy, and you can print that out. It's great. It lists all of the different crops, if you will, germination rate. When you plant it, it tells you what month to plant it. And it's kind of based on the Piedmont. So if you are all the way down by Savannah or in the southern part of the state, it might be, the dates might be a little bit off because it's like an average and it's probably more geared towards the Piedmont area, which is where I am. But generally speaking, it's going to be pretty close to that. So it's wonderful, tells you everything that you need to know, and it's a very, very super good resource. So if you don't have your phone or you're watching on your phone and you're like, oh man, I can't get that, don't worry about it. As I said, I record these and it'll be housed on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, and you can go there and just zoom right to this spot and then you can get it there, or you can use the email address at the end and message me. I'll be happy to send you the link, or you can just type in vegetable planting chart UGA and it should be one of the first things that pops up. But here's some of your typical cool season crops. It's going to be like cabbage and carrots, kale, collards, lettuce, mustard, greens, onions, English peas, or trying to think, sugar snap peas, stuff like that, I guess. Radishes, spinach, beets, broccoli, cauliflower, Swiss chard, turnips, and Irish potatoes. So a lot of those are greens. They fall under the green category. So that's why some people, like for instance me, I don't really grow a lot of greens. I'm not really that into it. So I don't typically do a fall and winter garden. Also, it gets a little dry in the fall when you're supposed to be planting. So because my garden is all the way out there, I don't feel like driving. Sorry, not driving. I wish I could drive. I wish I had a golf cart, but walking out there to water and water the seeds, and because it is kind of dry at this time of year when you're planting them. But if you've got a community garden, or you've got container gardening, or your garden's really close, it's perfect. So this is just kind of interesting, a little bit of trivia, and this kind of shows you the genetics of wild mustard. So like a lot of these plants started out as wild plants and then they were domesticated, if you will. So you see here that you've got a wild mustard plant, and it's evolved into all these different plants. So cabbages and Brussels sprouts, kohlrabies, kale, broccoli, and cauliflower. And so this one wild mustard green has been bred over time in order to select for different things, in this case, like terminal bud selection. Like in cabbage, you wanted one really big head. For the Brussels sprouts, you wanted itty bitty little Brussels sprouts, and the kohlrabi for it's kind of the root is growing above the ground. It's kind of interesting. I like that kind of stuff. All right, so all the different stuff that you can grow, leafy greens, that is kind of the hallmark of your fall and winter garden. So lettuces, there's all sorts of different types of lettuces. There's butter crunch lettuce, and I mean, romaine lettuce, and there's so many. Don't ask me to name all of them. I'm not a lettuce girl. I don't eat a ton of lettuce. I'll eat it in a salad when I go out because I don't know, it comes with my meal, but I just am not a huge lettuce girl. It's pretty though. I mean, I do like a touch of it on my hamburger when I eat it. But yeah, lettuce does great in the fall and winter. It's pretty tough. If we get some cold weather, it typically holds up really well. It's got a little bit of that, I just call it the natural antifreeze that prevents it from getting frosted on. Here, our cold time of the year is going to be probably late January into early February. Not to say that we can't get it at any time. I mean, it's snowed here in early December before, but typically that's when we have our coldest weather. And the lettuces, a lot of times, will just make it through pretty well. I mean, there might be a little frost damage, but not much. But there's a lot of options here, so I definitely suggest get a seed catalog. Go take a look. Even if you don't want to do that, you want to just go peruse what the big box stores have. They've got a lot of lettuce seed, and it comes up very, very easily, very easily. It is so simple to grow, so simple. And unfortunately, the deer like it too, so you just have to kind of watch it. So have a plan for that. Collards, that is another staple of the South, if you will. I mean, there's you have your collard greens on New Year's Day, and that is definitely something that there's a lot of heritage to. You got to know how to do them right, though. I mean, there's some people that really ruin them. um, I taste neat. There's I could tell you a couple places around here where you can get your meat in threes, and the collards are super good. But that's another one. So those do very well. They have the natural antifreeze. They can handle some of the cold weather that we have at certain times of the year. So they're a good option. Mustard greens, these can get a little spicy when it starts to get warm, so be careful. But if you do like that kind of thing, mustard greens are a great addition to growing in your garden. They do really well here and can tolerate, just like the lettuce and the collards, they can tolerate some of that colder weather. So they're another good addition. And there's a lot of different varieties out there that are really good for growing in and around the Atlanta area. Kale. I will not grow this. You will not find this in my garden. But some people really like kale. They put it in their salad. They'll make kale chips. I never got into that, but it does really well here. And there's a lot of different varieties of kale. So, yeah, you can have some purple and some green. And, if you like kale, it does really well here. So it's a good health food. It's superfood, I think is what they call it. So, again, does really well here. Encourage you to grow it if that's something that you like. Here's some Siberian kale. Um, it was so important, it got its own slide. Spinach. Spinach is one that it can actually tolerate a little bit more heat. So if you have it, it'll actually push through winter time into spring, and you will get some spinach harvest all the way through into when it starts to get warm. So spinach does really well. When it starts to get warm, it'll bolt, it'll send up the flowers, and that's their way, the brassicas and the other lettuces, that's their way of trying to complete their life cycle. So they prefer the cool or colder weather, which here in the South, that would be our winter. Up in the Midwest or the Northeast, you're going to have some of that in your spring. So that would be like your spring crop, and it would go through probably June or July. And then, you're lucky if it gets warm enough that you can have tomatoes. Here in the South, it's going to be your winter crop. So we're blessed with the fact that we can grow stuff all year round. Cabbages. So typically you plant your cabbages, and in January, mid-January-ish, maybe into early February, that would be when you would want to harvest them. And so every January, there's always some folks that don't get them in as early as they wanted to, or we get some cold weather, and you'll get a cold snap, and boom, it kind of ruins that outer couple layers of leaves that you see there. And then they look like, if you ever watch the movie Aliens and the eggs, yeah, that's what it looks like. It looks really creepy if you're looking into a field that's got a bunch of cabbage heads in it that got frosted upon, because then it just looks like the alien eggs for the face huggers. But generally, it's not frozen all the way down through. You can peel off the outer edges and still use them. But cabbages, that's, earlier you can get them in the ground in the fall, like now, the better off you are. That way you can get them harvested before we get some of that cold weather. And they can get big. This one's probably not from Georgia, but yeah, they can get really large. All right, bok choy. That's another opportunistic vegetable for the South. You can grow that, does fairly well here in the fall and winter. Again, the earlier you can get it in, you don't have to worry so much about frosts and freezing, and you don't want to lose that crop. So, different varieties of bok choy, but that's another option. Brussels sprouts, get those plants in the fall, and then you can harvest a bunch of different Brussels sprouts, and they'll just grow up, and then you can just pluck them off. They're really good. You can. I'm a big fan of doing a pan balsamic. Garlic pan roasted Brussels sprout, where they're tossed with balsamic vinegar and garlic and olive oil and then roasted in the oven, and they're really good. English peas. So this is one sometimes that people will wait and plant in February-ish, or sometimes in January, and then they'll harvest it hopefully before we have a late frost. I don't see a ton of people planting them necessarily now because it's a little hot and they don't like that. They are definitely a cooler weather type vegetable. But these will climb up a trellis, and then you can pick them. So a lot of times we get kind of second window for planting. So if you didn't plant it now, some of the quicker growing stuff like lettuce or your English peas, um, or some of your greens, if it's a faster growing plant, you can plant that in February. And then you have from February until you're really ready to plant your spring crop vegetables, which would be after the danger of frost. Uh, you can harvest your peas then. So this is a spring crop. So this is one that you definitely can get some out of. And if we have a more prolonged spring, you can get a longer harvest time for the English peas. And then you can add these in stir fries, or you can add them salads, all sorts of stuff. Or you can just go out there in the garden and eat them because they're kind of tasty. Broccoli. This is one along with cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and cabbages that you definitely want to put in the fall, like now. So you can find transplants. That's usually the best way that you're going to find these. You can find seed, but I really honestly suggest that you just get the transplants. And those should be readily available. Pretty much any garden center is going to have them. Unless you want like super fancy looking varieties of cauliflower, like the yellows and the purples and all of that, you're probably going to have to do seed for that. And in that case, you'll have to start that inside. Again, I've got webinars on seed starting, and we'll do another one at the beginning of the year in January. So you can always watch live then if you want to ask questions and pick my brain. But you'll always be able to find these transplants for fall planting and vegetable gardening at the big box stores and the garden centers. Broccoli is a good one. If it gets cool or you get a kind of a freeze, if you will, it's going to make it sweeter. It won't be as kind of bitter. Some people don't like broccoli because it does have kind of a bitter taste on little trees. But it's fine. I like it. And you're generally going to have one huge head that you will get, and you cut that off. And then after that, if you leave the plant in the ground, you will get several smaller heads that will come up that are kind of satellites around the main head. So you can freeze it, good for fresh. Put it in strombolis or calzones, that kind of thing. I've done that with a lot of cheese and other stuff, and it's pretty tasty. But yeah, that's one that you're going to want to put as a transplant in now. Cauliflower, same thing. And as I mentioned, if you want the pretty colors, you have to purchase that as a seed. You're going to have to start that yourself. Unless you happen across a smaller nursery that does have some of the boutique vegetables, in which case then you'll be able to get them. But otherwise, yeah, you're kind of stuck with what the garden centers have. But that's one you'll put in now. Cauliflower, so blanching, that's a process where you basically use a rubber band or some type of rope to kind of tie up the leaves. And that makes that plant a little less bitter and a little bit more tender. Personally, I like to just take cauliflower and kind of break it up and just munch on it. Some people like to use it as a rice substitute. So there's a lot of different options for that. Swiss chard, this is kind of a spinach substitute. It's got a little bit more antifreeze, if you will, plant antifreeze. It's safe. And it does pretty good over the course of the winter, and it will also push just fine into the spring with a little bit warmer weather. You can get some of I think it's called Dinosaur, that's the variety, and it's got yellows and oranges and reds and purple stems, so it's very pretty, but it's eaten basically the same way spinach is. Arugula, another kind of better, higher nutrient green that you can grow, and it makes for a good salad mix. And then we, of course, have the root crops. So we've got turnips and we've got beets. So there's a really good roasted root vegetable. I made some chicken legs and balsamic chicken legs mixed with roasted root vegetables. So even if you only have room to put a small row of these, the turnips are great just to munch. I know some people just like the turnip greens. You can get, I think it's Five Top is that particular variety where it doesn't have a big root. It puts all its energy into the greens. But if you do like a good turnip green. It's a, grow them and bring them into the office. We'll all eat the turnips. But beets are great too. Good fall winter vegetable that you can get start harvesting in like January, December, January. And there's a lot of different types of turnips. As I mentioned, different varieties if you like the greens versus if you like the root. And carrots. So carrots are another good one that you can put in, and you can harvest these in like December, January. Lots of different varieties. You're not stuck with the same old boring orange variety that you get at the store. There's yellow ones that have a purple core. There's yellow in the purple one. I mean, they're all really cool. So yeah, definitely, easy to broadcast these. Make sure that you thin. These guys have very tiny seed. You don't have to do much other than just kind of rake the area and then broadcast the seed. An easy trick, you get a handful of sand, mix your seed in with that sand or with some compost, and then just broadcast that. And that will help get that seed mixed better in with the soil. And then it will just settle down on the top of the soil and it'll start growing. You don't want to cover it up. So don't take a rake and cover it back up. It won't grow. It needs to be the smaller the seed, it needs to be on the top of the soil. Radishes. Again, lots of different colors and sizes and styles of radishes. Very quick crop to grow, 28 days, less than a month. And if you have a lot of water, it'll grow more. It is important that you go in and thin these so you can see if you don't thin them, they don't ever have a chance to fill out. They'll be very spindly and pretty much useless. So if you need something that's a crop that's going to fit in between, like you had to yank out another crop and now you don't want to leave that ground fallow, so you can always put radishes in. They're a really quick crop to get in there to grow. And then so daikon radishes are, you can eat them, you can, but you can also use them as a green compost. And you're like, what in the world is that? Well, you plant them and then some people just leave them there and let them rot. So they don't do anything. And the root, as you can see, is quite large. So it'll grow down into the heavy clay soil and it'll bust it apart. And then you just let it rot. And so all that vegetative matter, which is organic matter, then basically goes back to the earth. And then, a couple cycles of this, and that's going to condition your soil better. So if you've just got, I don't know, someplace that you think in the next 3 or 4 years you want to put a garden, you can go start putting these down there and just kind of forget about them. Just plant them and let them do their thing. You can also use them as deer forage. There's a lot of different uses for them. Rutabagas, just like turnips. Um, Not as many people using the greens here, but the rutabagas, you can definitely put them out just like you would a turnip or a beet, and you'll get those. Those are great for mashed rutabagas. You can use them as a substitute for mashed potatoes. It has a little bit more spice to it, so some butter on that or some cheese. It's a really good substitute for that. Kohlrabi, I love these. You can get purple or you can get green, and they grow, the bulbous part grows above the ground. So instead of growing below ground, like for turnips or for beets, these guys grow above ground. And they have kind of a nice consistency similar to a turnip. So good for just eating as a snack, or you can put them in salads. Onions. So yes, you can do the onions, and if you direct seed them, um, you're going to have more of a bulb. I've never had really good luck with onions. I get deer and other things that get in there and cause problems, or they just, I've got all sorts of issues in my garden. It's been there too long. I really need to start over fresh someplace else. But um, yeah, I mean, if you want to grow onions, this would be when you would put them in. Either get your transplants or sets. You can get them at Ace Hardware. You can order them in the mail. Probably Walmart even has them. So, did you know sometimes it's interesting for little bits of trivia that onions planted in the fall and grown over the winter make the largest onions. So Vidalias, if you're familiar with those yummy onions, no, I'm not going to take a bite out of it. There aren't. I do know people that will, but I don't do that. So they've got their own little antifreeze going on, just like the greens do. But there's all sorts of different varieties. So you can, if you can find or order the set, you'll get these little tiny, almost pearl onions and plant them now. Then you'll get your larger onions later on. And they keep really easily. So you just get them out in your garage when you harvest them, and then you can knot them together and just kind of hang them there. Save yourself having to go get some bags at the grocery store. Garlic. You can grow garlic here. It will grow. Like I don't worry about growing garlic. I have grown it in the past, but yeah, you can grow garlic. All right, seeds and transplants. I'm going to try to speed along here. When you're doing planting depth, you're going to make sure that you're looking at the back of that seed packet, and it will tell you everything you need to know. So this is for a carrot, but it'll tell you how much light, it'll tell you row spacing, plant spacing, how deep you need to put it, days to germination. That's kind of assuming an average temperature at that time of year, like 55, 60 degrees. And it tells you roughly how tall that plant's going to be. And if you need to thin, that kind of thing. So make sure that wherever you're putting, in this case, it's in ground, but if it's in a pot, that's fine, or a raised bed. Make sure that you're sticking to the same directions that the back of the packet tells you to do. Okay, as I mentioned before, you don't want to plant, for instance, carrots. You don't want to plant them only a quarter to a half an inch max, but they're perfectly happy also if you're just kind of sprinkling them on the surface. Watering. So you don't want to get that blast of water out there because you're going to destroy that new seed bed that you just spent so much time. You're going to get water, they'll pool up and move away, and then you're not going to have the ability to grow anything because it's all over here because you just put too much water on it. So just gentle, at least until they are somewhat established and have a semi-decent root system on them, you're just going to overhead water, which is different than what we usually tell you to do in the summertime because we don't want you to get a disease cycle going. But in the wintertime, it's a little bit different. So using just gentle overhead watering, wetting the seed bed so that it's nice and moist, that's going to give your seeds the best start that they need. Transplanting. So if you grew your own seeds, your own little transplants, like your cabbage or broccoli or something like that. I've got tomatoes and peppers in there, but they are not a winter variety of plant. They only grow in the summertime. So disregard that for winter growing. But transplants generally give you a little bit of a head start when you're putting stuff out there. Tomatoes, you definitely want to get those as a head start. Peppers also for your summer stuff, but in the winter, as I mentioned before, cabbage, broccoli, those kinds of things, it takes them a while to produce their fruit or the vegetable that they're putting out. So you need to give them a little bit of a head start. And that'll kind of, since we do have a little bit of cold weather, that helps there. And you can grow them or you can buy them. It's cheaper. I mean, have you seen some of those packets? They want like $6 for a tiny little cup with a plant in it. That's ridiculous. So if you're looking at transplants, try to, of course, choose the biggest, heavier transplants that have a good, nice root system, something that has no yellow leaves on it. Try to get there as soon as they come in. So just kind of keep an eye on the store to see when they get their fall stuff in and then go get your plants. You really don't want the last dregs of whatever happens to be there. Those are usually the worst. And then you're paying $6 for junk. Nobody wants to do that. Planting them. So you want them to, wherever you're putting them in ground or in a container or whatever, you want to take them gently out of whatever container they were in, plastic, or if it's cardboard type thing, the biodegradable one, tear it a little bit, make sure it's nice and wet. And you want to have wherever you're putting it down in there, make sure that the soil level comes up to the same soil level that it was in the cup or whatever little pot that you had that you planted. Don't plant it too deep, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Watering them. So make sure I always put water in the hole first. And then also after I've put the plant in and smoothed the soil around the top, I'll water again to kind of let the soil settle and then soak around the plant. And that will give the plant a good start so that it will have, nice moist soil. Potting soil. So if you're going to start seeds or you're in a container situation, just use potting soil. I really don't recommend going out in the garden and getting soil and bringing it back in and putting it in a pot. There's all sorts of little fungal diseases and bacterias and things like that. And you can get what's called damping off, which is bacterial infection, and it'll clamp off the little new transplant that you just grew, and the dies, and it can't grow back. I mean, that's the only stem it has. So it's not that expensive to go get yourself some potting soil. It's sterile. So that is the most important thing. You want to make sure that it's sterile. Um, so way better to use, no weed seeds in it, much better. So peat pots, you can get these. You can get the little peat pellets that are expandable. You can have pots that maybe you've saved from, other plants that you've gotten and then sterilized. Make sure you wash them and sterilize them. And you can use those to start seeds if you would like to. You can also get these handy dandy little tools where you get newspaper, which is harder to come by, and a lot of places aren't going there. For instance, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is going to stop producing its paper copy here pretty soon. So all the people that are getting newspaper, it's going to be difficult. I don't know. We're going to have to look harder and farther. So advantages of doing your own seeds, you can get, I mean, the sky's the limit on varieties. So you can get the really cool different types of tomatoes. I mean, there's hundreds of varieties out there. You can get all sorts of different types of lettuces. You can get everything started inside. That way you don't have to run down there and worry that the birds are eating your seeds and stuff like that. There's just so many varieties of vegetables out there, both winter and summer, that, the stores, the Home Depots and the Lowe's that have them, they don't sell a lot of that. They sell some of them, but there's a lot of really cool new varieties that are only available through mail order. So if you're up for that kind of stuff, hey, that's a way to go, especially if you're confident in doing your own seed growing. Cold frame. This is something that if you have a particular variety of winter vegetable that can be a little touchy to cold, this is a good way to kind of protect it. So you plant in there, and when it's nice out, you just leave it propped open. And then when you know it's going to freeze at night, you close it, and that helps protect it. And then after the temperature warms back up, you can go out there and open it up. Or if you know you're going to have, 4 or 5 days of really cold weather, like a couple of years ago, we had 60 hours of below freezing temperatures. This would have been great because it's, over the soil holds in heat, and you have sunlight that comes in during the day. And so even though it was really super cold out, oops, it held the heat in there, and it can help protect your plants that you have. So it's a good option, and you can either make them, all sorts of options there. We can help provide interesting different ways of doing that. Recyclables. Mulch. So you can get this all over the place. I mean, you don't have to buy it. You can make it yourself. And mulches are going to usually put these on the top. They're going to work down. You're going to get decomposers that kind of break it down from up underneath, and then it'll work its way into the soil column. And that's good for the soil. It's going to have a place for the roots to grow through, and you don't have to necessarily till it in. It kind of works its way in. If you're going to do this to begin with and you don't have any plants or anything in there, do it around. You can do up to 4 inches deep. You don't want to do much more than that, but it decomposes pretty quickly. You would be surprised at how quickly it decomposes. Green manure, sorry, running a little bit late here. So this is just where you plant a cover crop and kind of let it do its thing over time. And then you can till it up or let it die back. So that would be like crimson clover, rye, or wheat, southern pea, millet, winter legumes, that kind of stuff. That there's a lot of that out there. So it's better for the soil if you do that. It helps hold it down so erosion doesn't get it, or wind doesn't take it away, the top layer. We don't have a lot of topsoil here in the south, so this is a good way to put some nitrogen, especially with some of these legumes, back into the soil. They're nitrogen fixers, which then helps for any other crops that you have. And you can see they do it in greenhouses. You've got some green manure here that you have. Garden pests, we'll kind of whiz through this. Caterpillars, so you might have some worm issues. You can use, excuse me, you can use a cold frame and that'll help keep it out. Row covers, also another option that you can use to keep these guys out. There's options that you can use. So I have other videos that are up on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel that you can look at there if you don't want to use anything on them. But if you do, you can use BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and this is just a bacterium that once they consume, it basically kills them. But it's specific to caterpillars. So you can use that. You don't have to worry about if you eat it, it's not going to kill you. It's also what mosquito dunks are made of because the mosquito larvae will eat this and die. There's a lot of different species of this. So this particular one is good for caterpillars in your garden. So you spray this out, they eat a little bit of the leaf, and then it kills them. Aphids. So you can use insecticidal soap or neem oil, but insecticidal soap. You can find recipes online, but it's not that expensive. You can just buy the commercially available ones. And that's basically it in kind of a nutshell. So if you are looking for some of the topics that I have previously talked about, which is a lot of different stuff. And as I mentioned, I do repeat some of the topics like this. This one has been one that I've talked about before. You can check out the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, and there are all sorts of recorded videos on there. And then sometimes I go down a rabbit hole and I look at like bioluminescent animals and other topics that are kind of cool, and those are there as well. So let's see if I can bring up the chat. See if there's any questions. Probably not, because you guys are all good. You already know it all. Yes, the slides will be shared afterwards. I don't just send it out to everybody because some people register and then we also have the links up in various locations. So I really don't have a way to know who you are. If you want the slide deck, my email is right there. You can either hit me up I typically segregate the emails, so most of the UGA stuff goes to the UGA one. All of the extension stuff and stuff like this goes to the Gwinnett County one. So you can email me at the Gwinnett County address, the lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com, and I will send you a copy of the slide deck. Do you have issues with cross-pollination of broccoli and cauliflower? Personally, I don't grow a winter garden very often. And when you grow those, typically, just like you would in the summer crops, you kind of separate them so that it's not as big an issue. I haven't really heard of anybody complaining about that. And the places that I've seen that have had, I can't say that I've seen them growing close together. So that doesn't really answer your question. I'm sorry. Let's see. What's the best way to get rid of ants in raised beds and plots? I've tried a few things, but nothing has worked. Okay. So the organic way that they prefer you use is spinosad. That's an organic pesticide that's approved for organic use. Spinosad is also will kill pollinators, so be very careful how you use that. Just because it's an organic does not mean that it's 100% safe. It's not. So spinosad, Spinosed, is what is recommended for fire ants. Some people will just use hot water. All that does is make them mad. It might make them move a little bit, but generally they're not going to die for that. So spinosad would be the active ingredient that you're looking for if you're trying to get rid of fire ants. Let's see. I missed the first half. Would I grow callaloo like spinach? So I have not grown that myself, but that would be a more tropical type spinach that I think I would personally grow in the spring and summer. You can grow it inside. We actually had some that we had growing in a pot in the office for a while. Somebody brought some in and we rooted it and then started growing it in the office. So that would be something that you could experiment with. I don't think it's as cold hardy as regular spinach, though. I believe that is a summer type spinach that you would want to grow. What is your opinion on using pH meters purchased at the garden center? So, there's something called accuracy and precision, and pH meters are going to give you a rough idea of what the pH is in the garden, but they're not very precise. And pH is on the logarithmic scale, so it's, that's kind of big to the 100th power. So, you know, log of 10. And I would say if you get a um, reagent test where you're taking soil and you got a little bit of a powder and you put it in there with water, that's probably more accurate than one of these plants, the multimeters that you get that are supposed to be for moisture and other things like that. If you're spending $5 on a multimeter that includes pH, it's probably not going to be very accurate. The one you get from our soil lab is very accurate, and you get recommendations on what you need to do to adjust the pH. So I'm going to put a plug in for the extension soil test because I think that's probably a better option than using some. It'll give you a real quick idea. Similarly, if you have pH strips for a pool, if you mixed your soil in with a known pH 7, which would be coming out of your tap if you have county water, it'll give you a rough idea of what the pH is in your soil. But obviously, I'm going to go for more precise with the soil test. Oh, spelling for spinosad, SP, I'll just type it in there. Okay. All right, so I don't see any other questions. If you have any questions, you can quick drop them in there. Otherwise, this will pretty much conclude. I think my next one coming up will be on I think it's debunking organic myths. Like if you're into organic gardening, there's all sorts of stuff floating out there that, people are like, oh, use horticultural vinegar to kill weeds. And yes, but don't do it in your flower bed because it changes the pH and then your flowers can't grow. So there's a lot of stuff like that where we kind of break down some of that and tell you it's just a half truth or no, or yeah, that's a good idea, stuff like that. And then after that, I think we have one on fireflies. So you can learn all about fireflies and what you can do to help them with conservation efforts and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing And that's pretty much it. So I will go ahead and thank you all for coming. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later.